Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rux, I'm a Western tropical astrologer, and today we're going to be talking about the full moon in Gemini. This is coming up on the 27th of November. It is happening at 9:16 GMT time, and it's taking place at exactly 4 degrees 51 minutes of Gemini. Now, of course, we know it's a full moon, so the moon is in Gemini and the sun is going to be in the opposite sign, which is the sign of Sagittarius. And it's going to be conjunct the sun, it's going to conjunct Mars, god of war, of action, of passion, of drive, of stamina. So we can expect a very heated full moon, I'd say. Who is likely to feel this full moon the most? Those of you who have in your natal charts planets or angles, such as the ascendant or the midheaven, or important points like the north node, around 4 or 5 degrees of mutable signs. The mutable signs being Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces, Virgo. So you're likely to feel this this full moon the most. Folks, I know that some of you are here, and this is not your first, let's say, piece of content. This is not the first video that you watch on my channel. But for those of you who are here for the first time, I am going to say this: do not expect every single astrological event to speak to you or to resonate with you or to even impact you that much. Why? You're going to feel the most the astrological events that activate your natal chart, that activate planets, angles, significant points in your own birth chart, in your own personal astrological birth chart. Which is why, if you don't have, for instance, any planets or angles around 4 or 5 degrees of mutable signs, you might not see this full moon as being that impactful. You might witness it, you might kind of like look at what's going on around you and say, oh yeah, maybe I can see how that's how should we call it, aligned with the full moon, but you might not experience it as being that personal. So do keep that in mind. Now, there are some people that are gonna really enjoy this full moon, and those people are the ones that have planets or angles around 4 or 5 degrees of the following signs: Libra, Aquarius, Leo, and Aries. So you might really like this. Why? Because this full moon is going to make some nice aspects, some harmonious aspects to your planets and to your natal chart in general. Now, as I've mentioned, it is not, how should we put it? It's not the calmest of full moons. On the absolute contrary, I would recommend first and foremost looking back and having a think about what was going on in your lives, folks, around the 18th of June when we had a new moon in Gemini. Now we've got the full moon in Gemini, so we're kind of like coming full circle. The full moon is a time of completions, of closure, of peaks, of endings, but also of big kind of like aha moments. So at the time of the full moon, results are visible, outcomes are visible. We sow the seeds at the new moon, and we reap the rewards, or maybe we face the consequences. It depends what we've been doing at the time of the new moon. We reap the consequences at the time of the full moon. Now, because of the involvement of Mars, as I said, it might be a very heated, a very kind of like dynamic, a very active, and even a little bit conflictual of a full moon. There might be arguments, there might be conflicts coming into the spotlight. There could be the end of an argument that is coming up, very possibly. But I do see the spotlight being placed on disagreements and arguments and oppositions. And it does look like one of the most important aspects of this full moon is kind of like having to find a way to work with people who we maybe disagree with from like a beliefs perspective, or like a principles standpoint, a belief system, or like a life philosophy standpoint. Now, if we cannot work with these people, then we might just have to reorganize our lives and bring something to a close and bring something to an end if there's absolutely no chance that we can work with these people. This full moon is well, it's not applying, it's actually separating from a square to Saturn. So in the days before the full moon, so maybe the previous kind of like 2-3 days, and you know how I always say we're likely to feel the full moon also 3 days before and 3 days after. So in the days before the full moon, we might have felt like we were kind of like constrained and restricted and trapped somehow. And we might have felt like we kind of like hit a little bit of a wall. We bumped into like a major kind of like roadblock. So this full moon might make us very much aware of the fact that we need to take a decision. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna reorganize our lives? Are we gonna cut someone out of our lives? Are we gonna say goodbye to something? Are we going to have like a full-blown fight and then call it quits? Are we going to, I don't know, hand in a resignation? It's possible for some people. I'm gonna share who that is, who I've got in mind, obviously, it's going to be your decision to make. We all have free will. Astrology doesn't force us to do anything. Astrology is just symbolically and archetypally descriptive. So astrology is the cosmic weather, you could say. Speaking of the cosmic weather, remember that these general horoscopes, these general forecasts are just that. They are general. So they're, once again, they're not going to apply to everything in your life. Now, if you would like to get an in-depth, granular, as accurate as possible a reading, astrological reading that applies to you, then you need to work with the birth chart, you need to work with the natal chart, and you can also work with me, obviously, because I'm a full-time consulting astrologer, and I know most of you know this, but some of you might be here for the first time. I actually work with clients one-to-one on a day-to-day basis. That is my full-time work. If you are interested in getting a reading from me, you can find me on my website, which is written in the stars-astrology.com. Readings are based off of your own natal chart. We do need to have your accurate time of birth for that. So the time of birth is very, very important. In personal readings, when it comes to forecasting, topics like forecasting, we use a combination of techniques. So I don't just use transits, which is what we use in these general horoscopes. We use techniques like annual perfections, the firdaria, solar arc directions, secondary progressions, to paint a broad picture and to also get to the core of the themes that you're dealing with, to help you better understand the meaning of what you're going through, to help you better understand maybe the meaning of the life chapter that you're in, how you can make the most of it, how you can capitalize upon opportunities, how you can prepare and manage and navigate more kind of like difficult aspects of your life. And ultimately the astrology is incredibly useful when it comes to understanding the why of our life. Why is this happening? What is the point of this? What is the purpose? What do I need to learn out of this? What is the meaning? That is where astrology is an absolutely invaluable tool. Now, to find me, you can go to my website, written in the stars-astrology.com. You can go straight to the services section, and if you're a first-time client, you can go for the 1 hour, 15 minutes Zoom consultation. We can do your year ahead forecast in this. Also, if you haven't had your natal chart interpreted, I would recommend starting with the natal chart, because the natal chart is the snapshot of our soul's intentions in this lifetime. We can also focus on specific areas of interest. For instance, if you're more interested in understanding better your career potential, how you can maximize it, your financial potential, how you can make the most of the talents, skills, resources that you have been endowed with. If you would like to understand better your relationship sector and topics such as timings, when are you likely to meet someone significant, how is your relationship sector unfolding, then again, we can also address that in the 1 hour, 15 minutes Zoom consultation. Obviously, I always say, please let us prioritize what is kind of like burning, what is the most, how should we call it, pressing matter, so that we make the most of our time. And obviously, you can always come back. If you're an existing client, existing clients know that they've got additional options on my website, additional services that they can go for. If you have a few specific questions, you can opt for the 30-minute Zoom consultation, for the 30 minutes follow-up. If you've got if you've got an interest in understanding the year ahead, there is the 1 hour year ahead forecast option, which has indeed a preferential rate for returning clients, for existing clients. I mean, that option is only for existing clients. So now you know, and you know also where to find me. Going back to the full moon in Gemini, to the astrology of the full moon in Gemini. So the full moon is forming a T-square with Saturn and Pisces. So we are likely to see a bit of a restructuring of some sorts. Mercury is the ruler of the lunation of the full moon, and Mercury is forming a nice aspect with harmonious aspect with Venus, but a tense aspect with Neptune. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we are likely to see some sort of like collaboration and compromise, but also there's probably incomplete information. We don't have all the data. There might be inaccurate facts, inaccurate kind of like stats that are being presented. Conversations might be and communications might be quite confusing and vague and ambiguous, and this is not the time. I mean, obviously, if you have to, you have to. If you're signing a contract, if you're buying something, if you have to deal with paperwork, just be extra careful of scams, of illusions, of things not being what they seem to be, because that is a theme at the time of this full moon. Things are not exactly what they seem to be, and we could be dealing with incomplete data, incomplete information. The focus at a collective level is probably going to be at the time of this full moon on topics such as communication, transportation, advertising, sales, marketing, commerce, teaching, journalism possibly. There's lots of talking, there's lots of things that are being said, but talk is cheap, as they say. And if people don't have the data to back things up, I would even be reluctant in trusting everything that you read or hear or kind of like maybe hear on the grapevine. I think that's what they say. Very careful with gossip. It might backfire. I mean, it's never a good time for gossiping, but we know a moon in Gemini likes to talk. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have the moon in Gemini, you like to gossip. We're talking here about like the archetypal energy. Gossip can actually backfire quite nastily at the time of this full moon. So just putting it out there. Jupiter disposits of all the planets in Sagittarius, including the ruler of the full moon. Jupiter is in Taurus, so whatever is going on at the time of the full moon, whatever aha moments we have, whatever results we're seeing, I would kind of like follow the trail of the money. Money seems, whatever is being kind of like presented, whatever is being discussed, even if money isn't even mentioned, money seems to be at the kind of like core of things. I mean, you know what they say, follow the money and you're gonna find the truth. Do they say that? They do say follow the money. I don't know. I might have like added my own take on the saying. Yeah. Careful with scammers. Careful with things that seem too good to be true. That's what I have to say. That's what I have to say when it comes to the involvement of Neptune. Now, of course, we're going to go through the updates for each of the 12 zodiac signs, and I'm going to remind you, or maybe tell you for the first time, if you're here for the first time, please listen to the update for your ascendant, for your rising sign, because that is how this horoscope, this general horoscope is built. If you don't know your rising sign, of course, you can listen to the update for your sun sign, but I recommend listening to the update for your rising sign, because that's probably going to resonate the most, because the rising sign is where it all begins, astrologically speaking. Without further ado, let us dive into the update for each of the 12 zodiac signs, and we're gonna kick off with the one and only Aries, obviously. Aries, 27th of November, active 3 days before, 3 days after. You've got a full moon activating your third house, ninth house axis. Results, outcomes connected with education, but also with maybe something that involves traveling or a legal institution, a legal entity. I wanna say. you might not necessarily get the news that you expected. You could be completing something from like an education perspective, but the result might not be exactly what you wanted it to be. You might be a little bit disappointed. Now, I think it's worth asking yourselves, Aries, is, I don't know, the final grade important, or is it important that I have actually wrapped up this course? Now, you could be proud of having wrapped up a course, of having finalized maybe your thesis or something like that. There could also be a part of you that is not yet super confident in mastering the topic. So there's nothing wrong in going back and maybe going over kind of like old material, rereading old material, and making sure that you know what you're talking about and that you actually have a good grasp of the subject, I'd say. There might be some disruption in terms of traveling. You might need to kind of like rearrange your trip in some shape or form. Maybe it gets delayed, maybe it gets postponed. Having something like travel insurance wouldn't hurt. And some of you might need to fix something when it comes to your preferred means of transportation, such as your car. I'd say maybe something that has to do with like a leak of some sorts. Taurus suns and Taurus risings. This full moon activates your financial axis, your second house, 8th house axis. Look back at what was going on financially for you Taurians around the 18th of June earlier this year, because you could be seeing the results of some of the outcomes of some of the themes that were on your radar at the time. So earlier this year in June, it feels like you're probably gonna cut out of your budget maybe some old expenses. It also feels like you need to make a big payment. I want to say maybe pay for like a credit card or something like that. You might be paying your taxes. It could be a little bit more than you thought it would be. This is also a very good time to really look very closely at your budget and ask yourselves, Taurians, is everything that you're putting your money towards, is it all aligned with your vision and goals for the future? And if it's not, then don't be afraid to cut things out of your, I don't know, direct debit list, I'd say. You might also end up helping someone financially at this time. It could be a partner, it could be a friend. They do seem to be in a little bit of a pickle, I wanna say. Gemini suns and Gemini risings. This full moon puts the spotlight on you and your in your relationship sector. There could be a little bit of a fight around the time of this full moon with either a life partner or a business partner. There could also be a little bit of a disagreement, but potentially a fight with maybe like a friend or a colleague. It feels like if you want to keep on staying in the same place from a professional perspective, you might need to find a way to make things work with this person, or you might communicate to a boss that you no longer want to work with this person anymore, and that's totally fine. That's your prerogative. But I would be very careful how you talk about this person to a higher up, because they do seem to have their support, I'd say. This could also be a time when you decide to stop working with someone, maybe someone that was quite significant for your career, and you might decide, you know what, it used to be fulfilling, but now it's not worth it anymore. It could be a little bit disappointing, but it doesn't hurt to be very realistic about it, Geminis. Cancerians, Cancer suns and Cancer risings. This full moon activates your axis of service, health, and I feel like you need to rest at the time of the full moon. I feel like you need to take it slow, you need to take it easy. You might have really kind of like pushed yourselves work-wise. You might have even overdone it a little bit with like the health side of things. Maybe having worked out too much, having kind of like push yourselves too hard, I want to say. I would be careful not to do that, especially when it comes to working out, because if you do that, you might pull a muscle or something like this could happen. I do want to say some of you might just be feeling very, very drained by a situation at work. Maybe something that you put a lot of like energy into, something that you are very, very passionate about. But at the same time, it feels like some people are just not getting it, or they're just kind of like not seeing where you're coming from. Or maybe there's not a lot of clarity to them yet as to why you're so passionate about this thing. And it's okay. They don't have to get it all. And also, maybe it's a sign that you need to better kind of like flesh it out. Maybe maybe the reason why it's not so clear to them is because you haven't really taken them through the step-by-step kind of like approach that you used in your work so far. Some of you might also hear news of a colleague leaving, or you might decide to stop working with a team just because you can't really see eye to eye with them from like a mentality perspective, my dear Cancerians. Leos, Leo suns and Leo risings. This full moon activates your 11th house, 5th house axis. I mean, you might actually like this full moon. You could be celebrating something with friends, but there is a possibility, and you could be feeling like you've completed some sort of a goal. At the same time, careful not to overspend. And also, if you're celebrating something with friends, careful what you say, because you don't want to kind of like stir things up inadvertently and maybe cause tension in relationships. There's also a possibility, especially those of you who have kids, that you might hear from your child that they no longer want to hang out with a group of people, or that they have had a fight with a friend. I'd say they could be quite disappointed, but it is what it is. You might even advise them not to hang out with that friend anymore. A friend in particular might actually have some sort of painful piece of news to share with you. Maybe they've been going through a hard time financially. Maybe they've suffered some sort of a loss, and you might feel like you want to go in and kind of like support them in some shape or form, or lift up their spirits. Leos. Virgos, Virgo suns and Virgo risings. This full moon in Gemini, 27th of November, active 3 days before, 3 days after, is putting the spotlight on your career and your parents. You might be experiencing a little bit of a tense time. You might be in some sort of a conflict with a family member, especially with a parent. You might also experience the tension of a conflict at home, and maybe you're feeling like you're somewhat caught in the middle, and you need to put effort to mediate things and to kind of keep everyone calm and to keep everyone like grounded and centered. There could be a sense of like hurtful things that are being like said and thrown around. There could also be a sense of especially those of you who are in a relationship, there could be a sense of your partner going through a hard time in regards to their relationship with their parents. I'm gonna say this. You could be getting some sort of a result career-wise, Virgos, that also impacts your home life. So maybe you're getting like the news of a promotion, or maybe you're getting the news of like, I don't know, your manager, your management team calling you back into the office if you've been working from home. This could upset and annoy your partner, and I don't necessarily believe that you're going to get a lot of support from the partner's side. It's also possibly because they haven't fully understood everything that it will entail, so you might want to take the time to like explain to them. And also, if they are acting unsupportive, I would maybe sit down with them and see whether they're actually in pain in some shape or form, and they're hurting in some shape or form, because sometimes, well, many times actually, anger hides sadness. And if we dig deeper into the source of a conflict or an argument, or someone who feels like very kind of like angry and frustrated and enraged, we're likely to find suffering and sadness and maybe even grief. So do sit down with your partner. Last but not least, some of you Virgos might decide to stop working with like an old collaborator professionally, and you might make a big announcement as the world kind of like needs to know. You might make a big announcement and say, okay, I've stopped working with this person. Libras, Libra suns and Libra risings. This full moon in Gemini on the 27th of November, active 3 days before, 3 days after, is activating your axis of traveling, education. It is putting the spotlight on education and long distance traveling and matters connected with foreign lands and foreign countries. I do believe you're going to get a result of some sorts in this regard. It might not be exactly the result that you expected, however. You might feel like you need to work harder if you want to get the result that you want. There could also be a sense of confusion and ambiguity in terms of how your job is going to ask you to travel, or how often, or where, or how much your job is going to ask you to travel. There's also a sense of really being disappointed in your communication with either a colleague or a client, because you're not seeing eye to eye on a political, religious, or philosophical matter. I mean, if you want to keep the job, you might need to just kind of like rein it in. If you decide, and that's totally up to you, if you decide that you no longer want to work with these kinds of people, you can also throw in the towel and say, listen, I'm done. I can't pretend that I agree with this. And you might feel like you're in a bit of an internal conflict of maybe an ethical or a moral nature, just as an FYI. If you do have plans to travel around this time, there is a chance that work could get in the way, or work could ask you to reschedule or to be kind of like flexible. So I would get travel insurance, and I would also kind of, yeah, like keep an open mind in terms of the exact kind of like schedule. I mean, if you can help it, I wouldn't necessarily travel, but sometimes you just cannot help it. Last but not least, something might need to be fixed. I want to say either when it comes to your car or a partner's car around this time, my dear Libras. And if you are involved in any shape or form with kind of like foreigners, foreign lands, foreign countries, international environments, it does feel like you might need to like do something practical and concrete if you want to maintain the connection or the relationship. So let's say if you're working with foreigners, you might need to get some sort of like a certificate or like something that proves that you are legally able and allowed to offer these services, I'd say. Scorpio suns and Scorpio risings, this full moon, 27th of November, puts the spotlight on your finances. I feel like you're gonna have to pay a bunch of money, a chunk of money around this time. You might need to take care of debt, taxes, insurance. There could be a sense of other people kind of like taking money from you. I'm thinking of mortgages. I'm thinking of institutions that you might owe money to. There seems to be a squeeze on your financial situation because of other people kind of like dipping their hands into your financial jar, so to speak. So you might want to look at whether it's a possibility in any shape or form to clear out some debt, to maybe get rid of some credit cards, to maybe get rid of some maybe even subscriptions. You might even feel the need to reduce expenses connected with your passions and hobbies, or connected with children in some shape or form. You might even need to say no. For those of you who have kids, you might need to say no to a child when it comes to an expense, just because it might not be the best time. You might not be in the position where you can just kind of like dish out money on this particular request that the child might have. Challenging conversations around money with your partner can also be a theme here. Now, why challenging? Maybe because challenging doesn't mean bad. Challenging just means things need to get laid out on the table, and the elephant in the room needs to be addressed. I wanna say. So don't kind of like skirt around issues. Don't be afraid to to talk about finances, because otherwise you might find yourselves as a couple in a little bit of a pickle. So it's best to nip it in the bud, as they say. Sagittarius suns and Sagittarius risings. This full moon puts the spotlight on your relationship sector. Have a think about what was going on in your relationship sector, and I'm not just referring to romance. I'm referring to business collaborations, also professional collaborations, relationship with advisors, counselors, consultants. Have a think about what was going on in this sector around the 18th of June, because this full moon kind of like seems to bring to fruition and to completion themes and matters and topics that were on your radar at the time. So earlier this year in June, when it comes to your connection with a partner or a consultant or a collaborator. I feel like some of you could be reorganizing your home life and family life, because or kind of like redoing something around the house or restructuring something around the house. And it could even be something connected with finances, just because your partner is not in the same position that they were a while ago. You might disagree with a partner on a matter that has something to do with home life, family life, and living situation, and you could even feel a little bit disappointed that they're not on your side somehow. Or you could feel disappointed that they're not seeing your perspective, I want to say. There might also be something that's happening on the partner's side, career-wise, that feels a little bit disappointing to you, maybe because they didn't tell you before, or maybe because you weren't made aware of it. It does feel like there's a sense of a little bit of confusion in the air as to how things are actually going to work out in the home for you and your partner. You might even need to just really sit down and agree on a better way of working. I wanna say there is a sense of kind of like having to restrict things around the house a little bit. And maybe kind of like spend, I don't know, less money, or spend less of your resources, or reorganize something around the house, have difficult conversations with your partner around home-related matters. You might also decide to let go of an advisor or a consultant in some shape or form, because of private and personal reasons. So you might not even be able to like share with them why this is happening. I am seeing the possibility of a little bit of a fight, a little bit of a quarrel, possibly around the topic of children. Now, if you do experience this at home together with your partner, my dear Sagittarius, maybe make sure that you have expressed your position very clearly, because the other person might just not know what your position is. I'd say so. Do keep that in mind. Capricorns, Capricorn suns and Capricorn risings. This full moon is activating your axis of health and work. So some of you might end a job. Some of you might finalize a project work-wise. Some of you might also finalize something connected with your health. So maybe if you've started like a new routine, or if you've started putting effort into your health, especially as of the 18th of June, if you've started, I don't know, being more diligent with going to the gym or something like that, you might see some sort of result. I do believe, however, that something could interfere with, maybe even like temporarily, with some of your progress. You might need to address something that is happening behind the scenes, maybe something that is connected with your family. I wanna say, my dear Capricorns, and maybe you need to pause the amount of time or the amount of energy and resources that you allocate to like a health-related project. There could also be a sense of really disagreeing and experiencing a bit of a rupture in relationship, really disagreeing with the client or with a colleague, and it might feel like you can no longer work with this person. There's also the possibility of like a sudden change of your way of working with someone, maybe because team restructurings are happening, maybe because there's like a new tool that is being brought in. I believe that it can be quite a confusing time work-wise. So I would sit down, not get very enraged, because you might get quite angry, and maybe express your concerns to whoever is involved. I'd say. If you need to complete something work-wise that involves maybe making a presentation, I would ensure that you're speaking using the correct kind of like language, or the correct kind of like terminology, and I would ensure that the presentation is adjusted so that your audience gets it, because there is a high chance that they might just not get it. It might feel like you're like speaking a foreign language, metaphorically speaking, of course, Capricorn. So do keep that in mind. Aquarius, Aquarius suns and Aquarius risings. What is going on at the time of this full moon? Well, I think you're gonna like it. because the full moon is making nice aspects with any planets that you might have in Aquarius. Some of you could be really just having a good time and enjoying themselves and celebrating life, maybe having some really enjoyable conversations. I do see like sparks flying also on the romantic front. Maybe you're feeling very drawn, very attracted to someone. Maybe there's a sense of like the forbidden fruit in some shape or form. There's also a sense of maybe having to make a decision on the romantic front as to whether you're going to give someone a shot or not, as to whether you're going to continue seeing someone or not. Some of you could be dating, some of you could be active in like your circle of friends, maybe going out with your friends and just kind of like hitting it off with someone. You do seem to have your reserves. Maybe because this person that you're hitting it off with, they don't seem to be aligned with you in terms of what you value, but at the same time, your values might also change. So do keep that in mind. I also see for some of you, especially those of you who have kids, the possibility of having to spend quite a bit of money on your children, maybe on something that has to do with them attending like a group type of event, like, I don't know, like a school trip or something like that. And some of you could also hear news of pregnancy, but if that is the case, it feels like you kind of like need to sit down and like really make some calculations financially, just so that you know how you can kind of like work with this, like how you can maybe adapt, adjust your expenses, your budget, and so on to take this into account. In any case, it does seem to be like a fun time. I would also be careful not to overspend. And if you're paying for people, just make sure that you're being charged the right amount. And I mean, are you really in a position to pay for people? I don't know. You've got the answer. If you are, fantastic. If you're not, don't do it. But you got free will, and I know better than to tell an Aquarius to give them any sort of indications as to what they should do with their lives. I mean, I'm an Aquarius sun, so most of the times if someone tells me you should do this, like my answer is like, you should mind your own business. And I kid you not, that is, I mean, I might not say it, but in my head, I'm like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to tell me what to do with my life? Anyway, I digress. Pisces suns and Pisces risings. My lovely Pisces, this full moon puts the spotlight on your family. Home life, living situation, but also your parents. Look back at what was going on in these areas of your life around the 18th of June, because this full moon is likely to bring to a culminating point maybe themes that were on your radar earlier in the year. Some of you could move around this time. Some of you could be finalizing some sort of a long-term project, maybe connected with your home life and your family life. Maybe you could be finalizing the renovation of the house. Some of you could also feel like you need to maybe impose some boundaries in relationship with a family member and especially with a parent, I'd say. You could also feel a little bit caught up in the middle between two parents who are not seeing eye to eye, and it might feel like you just kind of like have to hold the fort together. You could feel a bit disillusioned and maybe disappointed because you can't make more of an impact, but it always helps to be kind and empathetic and maybe make others aware of the need to be kind and empathetic, my dear Pisces, like you're inclined to be. Some of you could also be saying goodbye to something, maybe to like someone or something that used to be an important part of your home life and residence sector. So I don't know, let's say you had a lodger, they could let you know that they're leaving. For example, let's say you were renting a place. Now you need to say goodbye to it because the landlord is selling it. Something along those lines. I am seeing you being a little bit maybe confused as to what the next steps are. You know where I would start? I would start with kind of like talking to, maybe talking to a friend, or just kind of like talking to like a sibling or a colleague, and maybe just talking about practical stuff as to what the next steps are. Some of you could be putting a house on the market. So you could be like literally selling a house. I do see you being a bit maybe melancholic and nostalgic, and maybe even sad as a result of this. But at the same time, I do believe that you've got other things that that are kind of like really exciting to you, that you may want to focus on, let's say. And that, my lovelies, is your full moon update, your full moon horoscope. Please let us know in the comments how the full moon unfolds for you. Also, if you want to work with me, remember that you can find me on my website, which is writteninthestars-astrology.com. Straight to the services section, you can go there and purchase a consultation, a reading with me, a personal reading with me. At the time when I'm filming this, I have a few slots left, just a handful of slots left for December. But you're always going to see on my website, if you go on to any kind of like service page, you're going to see that I'm taking bookings from like a certain period onwards. So you're gonna see, I generally kind of like book like a month or like a month and a half in advance. So you're gonna know kind of like what is the waiting time. And in case you're wondering, in case you're thinking, Rux, I don't know, how long am I gonna have to wait? Also, for those of you who are astrology students, you can find on my website, and this is for intermediate plus students, not for beginners, the 3 recorded courses that you can buy. I ran them live in the past, and now you can buy the recordings. The Natal Chart Interpretation Masterclass, the Forecasting with Transits course. This is over 12 hours of material, and it is, I mean, hands down, after you complete the course, and there's plenty of examples, you can literally build from scratch a forecast for you, for someone else. It is very in-depth. And also for those of you who are better, who want to get kind of like better acquainted with Saturn, and especially the transits of Saturn, there's also the Saturn Transits Masterclass that you can purchase separately. It's roughly like a little over 2 hours long. And it's fantastic, especially if you're going through your Saturn return, and generally if you want to better understand how you can work with the energies of Saturn in transit, that is for you. But I repeat, it's not for beginners, it's for intermediate plus astrology students. Essentially, if you have a good understanding of houses, signs, planets, what they mean, this is for you. If you don't have that, then not yet. Don't purchase the courses just yet. Folks, it has been a pleasure as usual. If my content is useful, don't forget that you can leave a donation using the thanks button underneath the video. You can also follow me on Instagram at RuxUnbelievable for more personal updates. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye.